Good afternoon and welcome to Skeptic Haven. I am your host, Ryan. Today on Women's Atheists Unload, my co-host Stacy and I will be joined by Dr. Janja Lalich, a renowned expert in the field of high control groups. And you won't want to miss this because it's going to be so enlightening. Stick around.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hello. Hi, Susie.
Hi.
We've got an interesting show for ourselves today, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Two newbies leaving the cult and we have a cult expert. I mean,
I know. I think it's
come
great
on.
timing. Very great timing.
Right. All right. Well, why don't we get started since we only
Yes.
have an hour and introduce our special guest.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Janja Lalich. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this is a full circle moment for me. You were one of the people that helped wake me up. I would love to give you an introduction and hopefully I can do you some justice, Dr. Lalich. She has done extensive research, writing, and speaking on the topic of closed groups that has made her a go-to consultant for mental health, legal, and medical professionals. She has dedicated over 30 years to an outstanding list of accomplished works, like a founder and director of the Center for Research on Influence and Control, and author of several books, including the critically acclaimed Founded Choice, True Believers and Charismatic Cults, and even appearing on TV shows like Cults and Extreme Beliefs, the one that woke me up, as a professional consultant. And yes, I could go on and on, but this is only an hour. Thank you so much, Dr. Janja Lalich, for being here.
Oh, thanks a lot, Ryan. And Kelly, it's right. It's Kelly, right?
Stacy.
Stacy.
Yes.
Who's Kelly?
I don't know. Somebody.
There's
That's okay.
probably a Kelly here somewhere, I'm
Maybe.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are so pleased to have you here. Again, as we said, backstage, we're two newbies waking up out of a call and being able to have the privilege to ask questions and talk to somebody who's not only like had similar experiences to us, but has come all the way out of it and helping to educate people like us. It really is an honor to have you here. I know I'm kind of like going overboard, but really this is important to me. So
It's
thank
a
you for
moment.
being here.
Yeah.
You're being a fan girl. You're being a fan.
Yes. You are.
Can I get
That's
your
okay.
autograph? So Dr. Lalich, you were in a political cult. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Wow. So when we think of cults, I don't think that most people think of a political cult being a cult. Do you get that quite often?
I do. Not as much as, so for example, when I first got out of my cult, I had been in for like 10 and a half years and I got out in the mid 80s. And at that time, only religious cults were talked about. So I actually had to kind of do a lot of homework to sort of prove to myself that I had been in a cult, right?
Right.
But then I started doing, I started speaking at conferences. There were some cult awareness organizations around at the time and talking about political cults. And of course, now we know there's every imaginable kind of cult that you want. But political cults aren't that rare. I mean, there's plenty on the right, some of the white supremacist groups, some of the other racist groups. Certainly things like QAnon and even the anti-vaxxer movement, you could consider those as political cults because of the stance that they take. So,
Great. So was you kind of your waking up moment, was that kind of your driving force? Like what has driven you to accomplish so much in your life?
Well, I guess the way I see it is that I've turned a bad thing into a good thing. When I got out, I was almost 41, and I was pretty much brain dead, and I felt like a 15-year-old. But once I luckily found a fantastic therapist. I was in New York, and at the time there was a cult clinic, both in New York and in LA. Yeah. And so once I got better, I started speaking and writing. I wrote my first book in 1994, Take Back Your Life, which has really been a classic. And then after 10 years, I finally made the decision to go to grad school, which was a huge decision.
Wow.
And so I was like 50 when I started grad school. So I tell people it's never too late. It's never too late. So, during that time, it just sort of happened that the Heaven's Gate suicides happened while I was just about to write my dissertation. And so that's what I ended up doing my dissertation on, which was a comparative study of the cult I was in and Heaven's Gate, because you couldn't find two more different groups, right? And that's Bounded Choice. That's a user-friendly version of my dissertation. But then I taught for 20 years as a sociology professor at one of the California state universities. So during that time, I still did, I did interviews. I did a lot of consultations with families and former members, and wrote another book, the book about children growing up in cults, Escaping Utopia. And truthfully, when I retired, which was early 2019, and I left where I was living in Chico, California, moved back to the Bay Area, and I thought I was retiring. I really did. And then the pandemic hit, so I thought, okay, we're sheltered in. It's time to write my memoir, right? I'm in my 70s, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, then we had QAnon and the anti-vaxxer movement and people falling down these rabbit holes. And my emails just exploded, like all these people to talk. So I was like, okay, here we go. I still haven't finished the memoir. I'm working on it. But I've been busier than ever. I mean, and I enjoy it. I mean, I hear horrific stories. It's true. It's why I don't watch a lot of the documentaries at night. I pretty much watch British mysteries because I just can't do cult stuff at night. But I love
real.
Yeah, I love helping people. I love seeing the progress in their recovery. I love helping parents understand better what their person is going through. I've been expert witness in some legal cases, and that feels great to help someone get justice. And so, it's rewarding work. I'm going to be 78 next week. So I'm like, which is why I started my nonprofit, because I want to make sure I leave behind a legacy and enough trained people who can carry on with the work that I've been doing.
Wow.
That's monumental. I love to hear that. And we're going to have to make sure that I'm sure that we probably do have a bunch of information already taken down, but I'm sure there's some other things we'd like to talk to you about. You were backstage, you were talking about workshops and whatnot. I would love to make sure we get into that. If you don't mind, I would like to ask you about what you mean by the term bounded choice. Like, could you explain that? Is that like a theory?
It's a theory and a framework. So when I did the comparative study of the cult I was in, which was called the Democratic Workers' Party, and Heaven's Gate, I analyzed all the documents, all the videos. I interviewed people from both experiences. I mean, Heaven's Gate people who obviously left before the suicides. And so, you would think, okay, here's this sort of new agey UFO cult that, all they want to do is leave this earth. They think it's horrible here. They don't even think they're actually humans. And then you have on the other side this very down-to-earth Marxist organization that loves the working class, loves people, wants to, get rid of racism and sexism and all these wonderful things. So you'd think, how could they at all be similar? When in fact, once you take them apart, the same things are happening. They're just called something else. Group, right?
Yeah.
So out of that work, I developed the idea of bounded choice, which is my goal was to explain sort of why do people in cults do what they do that seems so incomprehensible to people on the outside, right? Like, how does that happen? And so basically what I look at are four features: the leader, the belief system, the control mechanisms, and the influence mechanisms, and how that creates what I call a self-sealing system, which means a system that's closed in on itself and you have no other reality checks. And once you've gone through the indoctrination to a point where you enter, you basically are almost like a microcosm of the cult, right? It's absolutely who you are and what you identify with. And you don't entertain any other belief systems or ideas. And at that point, you're in the mindset that I call bounded choice. And what that means is, yes, you have free will, which is such a controversial concept. You have free will about insignificant decisions like, oh, what should I eat today, or what should I wear today, or whatever, right? Depending on, right. But the big questions, the big issues, like, can I challenge the cult leader? Can I question what we're doing? And God forbid, can I think about leaving? Those are no-nos, right? Because in that case, your decisions are confined and constrained by the will of the cult leader and the will of the cult. So you know exactly the decision you need to make. So in a sense, it's like what I call an illusion of choice, right? Free will has been altered by the will of the leader. And so you know exactly what you need to do to stay in the good graces of the leader and reach, whatever salvation he or she has promised you.
I have a question about like the leaders. I've actually wanted to know this because I know a lot of cults have like charismatic leaders. Like we can think of like Waco, Texas, and like the charismatic leader from there. But in my situation, when I left the Christian denomination, the Christian church that we were in, it was a small church that we were members in, and the pastor, I wouldn't consider him like super charismatic, but the way they went about it when we left is they publicly shamed us, they excommunicated us. So in that respect, like it was just a Christian church. Who would he be, that leader, or is like who's the leader in the Christian denomination? Like for Jehovah's Witnesses, they have like the governing body, they have Bethel. Yeah. So for Christians, a lot of them don't consider Christianity a cult because unless you're in like a mega church and that pastor's I feel like the lines can be blurry. So.
Right. So, well, first of all, not every Christian church is a cult or Christian religion. There are some legitimate, healthy religions out there. You probably don't want to join one right now, but
no,
but there is that. But the whole thing about charisma is kind of something people don't really understand. First of all, charisma is a social relationship. So what that means is you are the person who grants somebody that characteristic. You are the person who says, oh my God, John Kennedy is so charismatic, or some actor, or Martin Luther King, whoever, right? You give that to them, some guru. It's not a personality trait that people are born with, which is what people think, right? They think you're born this charismatic figure, right? And that's why some people can go completely gaga over someone, and other people are like, what? What? So it's a social relationship. It really depends on the person. Once you grant someone that characteristic, once you decide your leader is charismatic, then that becomes a power imbalance, because you have decided that that person is special and unique. Therefore, they now have power over you. So it can be that someone, I certainly never thought of my leader as charismatic. She was overweight and drunk half the time and wore creepy polyester clothes and, but what they are is authoritarian and domineering, right? For the governing body, how I understand that is that there is something we call charisma by proxy, right? So what that means is other people who've been put in leadership and this would apply to the governing body, they basically kind of inherit the charismatic leadership from the original leader, right? So they expect the same complete commitment, loyalty, whatever, obedience, as though they are, in a sense, speaking for the founder or the leader.
Yep. Unquestioned authority.
Exactly.
And it just kind of continuously gets passed on. And if you can get inside of that little system, good luck to you. Good luck. I don't know if you heard, sorry, side note, did you hear that one of their governing body members was just taken off?
Yes, I've seen those posts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the XJW community is kind of going crazy right now. So you got yourself involved with the cult. What do you think drew you to a cult? Like, I'm sure you would never go, oh, hey, today I'm going to join a cult. What was it that drew you to it? Like, was there something, like, what draws people to cults? Why even join them?
Well, basically, the message of the cult has to resonate with you, right? So this is why if I always say I never would have joined a meditation cult. I can't sit still that long. But a political cult that says it was going to, change society and make society more just and equal. Well, that sounded great to me. I mean, I was 30 years old. I'd already been to college, to the University of Wisconsin. I had my degree. I'd lived in Europe. I did the hippie thing. I, did a lot of stuff in my life up till that point. And it sort of felt like, okay, now it's time to put my money where my mouth is, right? And that, I say I'm for social justice. What can I do about it? And I happened to meet a woman who invited me to a study group, and, which was a front group for the cult, which, of course, I didn't know it was a cult. They seemed like serious people. 2 friends of mine were joining at the same time. And we always say to each other, well, if you hadn't joined, I wouldn't have joined.
Because there's that trust too, right? You think, well, they're going, so it should be okay.
Right. It should be okay.
Yeah,
right. That's how it happens.
A very good point.
More than 2/3 of people are recruited by a friend, a family member, or a coworker. So it's someone who makes that initial contact and invites you to something or introduces you to something, or as you read some book or listen to some guru speaking somewhere.
Which I think is so the reason that the Jehovah's Witness organization and the plethora of the other ones that proselytize make sure that they enforce and like knock it into your brain that you should take every opportunity to preach the good news of God's kingdom. And if you don't, they consider you to be blood guilty. Like you're not actively trying to save other people's lives by giving them God's message. Because when Armageddon comes, if you had that opportunity and you didn't take it, like God might have to take his vengeance out on you.
Right.
Because you had an opportunity and you didn't use it. But
it's the big guilt trip. Oh yeah.
Right. But you can pull a lot of people in that way. I know I saw my parents pull a few people in. They're not in it to this day still, so it didn't last, but it had that effect on them because people trusted my parents and they were friends of the family. And, so that's why it's so important that they make sure they indoctrinate people into that guilty feeling and that shameful feeling. Like I've got to save, like that urgency of needing to save people's lives.
And also you don't want to get in trouble. I mean, there's so much of it.
Ostracized.
Yeah, so much of cults are based on fear, right? Yeah, fear of screwing up while you're in it. And then, of course, if you leave, most cults are going to do some form of shunning. I know the JWs do. I mean, our group did. I've been shunned. Yeah, we would do what we called be expelled with prejudice. And what that meant was if you saw that person on the street, you had to walk right past them as though they didn't exist. I mean, we did the same thing. So,
and that's for a political cult. That's just mind.
Oh, wait, damn! Yeah, that was for a political cult. They made you act like that.
Yeah, and it's in a lot of cults of all kinds. I mean, they all do the same thing pretty much. They might call it something else. But, especially for a religious group, I mean, when people ask me what's the difference between a cult and a religion, I mean, that's one of the big differences. You should, if you go to the corner church and you decide to leave completely, or maybe go join another church, they shouldn't stop talking to you. Your neighbors shouldn't stop bringing you cookies at this time, right? I mean, a healthy religion wouldn't do that. So
Exactly.
a healthy religion realizes that there are other religions, that people have a choice, and that they might think theirs is the best, but they don't think it's the only one.
Right.
And that's the difference with religious cults. They are the only one.
Yeah. I think that this is a really good point to talk about when it comes to people who do wake up and finally realize oh, wait a minute, something might be going on here. But specifically, because I can speak from experiences, I have friends who are still physically in the religion. We call them physically in, mentally out, but they still don't have a plan of exodus because of the issues that we face. And I think the issues go deeper than simply, I say simply shunning, I'm not poo-pooing it because it's devastating and it's disgusting. I've been through it. And children, nobody should ever go through it, but specifically children should never have to go through it. But there's so many challenges that we face leaving a high control religion, and shunning is just one of them. Do you have any that you can add, Stacy, or even Dr. Lalich, when it comes to leaving issues that people face?
Oh, leaving is very difficult. I mean, just even making the decision to leave is extremely difficult. I mean, I was brutally unhappy for 5 years. I could not figure out how to get out. I used to wish every day that I'd be killed in a car accident, because it was the only way I could see to get out.
Oh my gosh.
And so, with most groups, there's the fear, there's the potential loss. You may lose your whole family, you may lose your kids, you lose your identity, you lose your chance at salvation, whatever, right? There's such a difficult decision to make. And and how it's done really varies depending on the cult and how tight it is. If you're on a compound somewhere in the middle of nowhere, that's going to be tough, right? Whereas, we were in the middle of San Francisco, but still, people leave, they have nothing. And especially for kids who were born in a cult, that to me is the most tragic, because they get out. Were you born in, Ryan?
Yeah, basically I would say I was born in. Yeah.
I mean, people come out, they don't even know their real names. They don't have birth certificates. They don't know if they have relatives on the outside. Sometimes they've spent most of their lives in other countries, but they are American. They don't know how our education system works. They don't know how to get a GED. There's no resources. I mean, any former cult member can go to a domestic violence shelter and they'll get turned away. They don't qualify, right? So a lot of the kids, and they're not kids when they leave, they're usually young adults and maybe even older, they end up living on the streets. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to get help. They don't know where to go.
Right.
And it's just tragic. It's just tragic.
I think that's a really important, I keep saying something important, but everything you're saying is really important. Right, but seriously, okay, just for instance, when because all I have is my experience, but looking for somebody like a therapist to talk to. I wanted to find a therapist who had, who's been accustomed to understanding what happens inside of cults to some extent, so that way I didn't have to explain some of these issues like shunning and, these code words that you only know if you're on the inside. Yeah, because there's all that coded language and undertones that you don't necessarily get unless you're inside. Do you, as a medical, a medical professional who wants to, help people be more understanding about cults, do you have any advice for those kind of professionals when it comes to dealing with people like us?
Right. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a sociologist and an educator. But my team of people last year, we led some courses for therapists and social workers where they got CE credit. And, we spent the entire course sort of giving them information and helping them understand better ways to work with clients who are coming out of cults, because most therapists don't have a clue. And I've had so many people come to me and say, just horrific experiences they had by just going to whatever therapist. It's
Yeah, I've had
Yeah.
a few friends who just felt like they walked away feeling more defeated, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And it's important, first of all, to remember that you're hiring the therapist, they're working for you, right? So your plan with the therapist should be what you want, not what they want, right? That you shouldn't let them push their favorite modality onto you. Like if they're pushing for EMDR, it might not be the right time, or there may never be a time for EMDR in your case. So on my website, the janjalalich.com website, we do have a checklist. And in my book, Take Back Your Life, checklist for, what questions to ask when you're interviewing a therapist. And you should do it just like an interview.
Ooh. Yeah, see, that is really helpful information, because it's things that you don't really realize until you're in that situation and you're having to spend like 10 minutes explaining some little cultural idea inside of the cult that other people just don't quite get, but it's affected you, so much that, I just realized I have two little bears on my chest. I was at a babe shower.
I thought they were necklaces. I thought they were little
I thought they were warped.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was like, wait, what the hell is on my skin? It's two little baby bears. Totally lost my train of thought there. Sorry, y'all.
That is okay.
But no, I think that list of questions for people, make sure that you take a look at all the information that Dr. Lalich has and her book and etc. Is there one book that you've written that you would recommend, like a first go for people who are just kind of waking up and situating themselves in the real world?
If it's a what I call a regular cult survivor, not a kid, Take Back Your Life is really, it's pretty much a classic. It's all about recovery. Now, unfortunately, right now it's only available in audio because I'm revising it and updating it, and it's taking me much longer than I hoped. But I do hope it'll be out by summer, back in print on Amazon, wherever. Right. If you're someone who was born or raised in a cult, I would start with my book, Escaping Utopia, because that one's based on the 69, I think it was 68 or 69 interviews that I did with people born in who left on their own, not with their family or whatever, just on their own, either as a teen, a young adult, or even in some cases I've had people 40 years old come to me and they just have left a cult they were born in. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. I'm in my 40s, and I had no idea. It was the first time I heard it. Like, of course, we heard it inside of like the Kingdom Hall. Like they'd say, "Oh, they say we're a cult. We're not a cult. We don't drink the Kool-Aid." Right. Yeah, it's one big joke. And like waking up, I can look back at certain moments where they would say things, and I realized like, oh, they were prepping us for, that instance where we would get that maybe in the public eye. We're not a cult. We don't drink the Kool-Aid. We can leave if we want to. We're not forced to. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. So you say.
We can go to college if we want to. Haha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to think that education was of the devil. So there's that.
Yeah.
Have you had any experience with people leaving cults associated with like multi-level marketing? Because
that's a good one, Stacy. Oh, the MLMs are hot. They are on point right now.
Yeah, no, there's so much coming out about different MLMs, but on Instagram.
My Lord.
And I don't know if you saw the Lalich.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I did. I saw that documentary or whatever.
I think that really started this whole thing of people waking up about MLMs, because not all of them, but a good chunk of them are run just like cults.
They use the same tactics, I think. The love bombing.
Love bombing, guilt, shame.
So big. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize it, like it's too, because most people, I would think, are joining because they're looking for something. And especially if you're a bit lonely and you join a group and all of a sudden you have all these people just cascading you with love that maybe you've not had, or exception, whatever it is. And you don't realize like how aggressive it can turn. Like it can almost be the reverse at times. Like I remember if I didn't make all the meetings that I needed to make, instead of love bombing, it was like that shame bombing. Like,
Right.
Why can't you make it? Why is your job more important? Don't you know Jehovah provides? So
Right.
it was like a similar kind of situation, but just the reverse. But I have a friend who keeps me like up to date, like on my little TikTok. And I don't know if you heard about this MLM person who took a group of women on a hike, and she didn't tell them she was going to take them on like a 15-hour hike, and they weren't properly dressed. They didn't have like their medications. Somebody was a diabetic. If you look it up, I'm telling you, it's so wild. But people were getting sick, and she had the nerve to just be like, well, they're not like, you need to be stronger. You need to be prepared. This is the real world. Like, no, you put those people, they trusted you. They didn't ask enough questions. She kept continuously trying to shift the blame to them when she's the one who led them out into the wilderness without some supplies. Who does that?
What MLM was that?
I forget what MLM it is, but I feel like it's some kind of health wellness one. I can get back to you with that one, but I'm telling you, it was pretty big all over TikTok. But I feel like there's been a huge uptick, and I don't know if it's because I'm more aware. I don't know what you think, Stacey, but I feel like I've come across way more MLMs that have this.
I was in an MLM.
Were you?
Yeah, that's
what flavor?
I was in. It was Sensi, and they were Mormons, right? And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
okay, that makes sense.
I was always I could never fully drink that Kool-Aid because I would see how everyone worshipped the founders of it, and I started listening to like podcasts exposing like cult tactics in MLMs, and so that was part of my leaving religion, because I was seeing a lot of the similarities between religion, cults, and listening to podcasts on QAnon, and I was making that connection. So I was like, I think these are all the same, actually, when you boil it down. So yeah, I would just like to hear kind of what your experience has been with people who have come to you with leaving MLMs, because I know there's been someone in the chat asking if you could just touch on that, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is. It's been, excuse me, allergy season here.
Yeah.
It's been known for a while. Groups like Amway and Herbalife and some of the more well-known ones. But as I said earlier, I think the LuLaRich documentary really opened it up for people, and so we've had people come to our courses, come to our discussion groups for survivors. It's also similar to all the, it's all part, a lot of it is all part of this sort of wellness, mindfulness stuff that's happening, and people going off on these retreats, like the one where they were doing the sweat lodges, and I think three or four people died.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yeah. So there's just so much out there in so many different forms, and MLMs, unfortunately, I think attract primarily women, either because they want to help with the family income, or maybe they're a single mom or whatever. And I've known people who've just gone so into debt, like borrowing money from everybody they could to keep buying these damn products. And it's
garage
really
full of products.
Yeah,
they had to keep buying stuff and moving stuff.
Very predatory.
It's very predatory. They take advantage of people who are really, probably more often than not, are the ones who really need it, like an extra source of income than other, because this probably is a stay-at-home mom or somebody who's got a part-time job, and this is like a extra little
and young people, a lot of young people. I've worked with a mom, her her 19-year-old son, his room was completely filled with products. I won't mention which company, but and he was so ashamed of himself because he wasn't yet a millionaire, like all the people in the, the big, they have those giant meetings in the, ballrooms, and people are cheering and going crazy. And then they hold up a few people as like, look, this person made it, this person made it, right? And, she said her son was just like in his room, depressed, sitting with all these, it was just tragic,
Yeah.
Wow. Can I ask you, how do you feel? Because we've used some language that I think is maybe not as aggressive. I don't know how to word it. How do you feel about the word cult? Do you try to avoid it, or do you just say it is what it is? Or
well, it depends on the context. I'm happy to use the word cult. I think it has a historic meaning. I know there is a group of people, mostly academics, whom we call cult apologists, who go to courts to defend the cults, who try to get the media not to use the word cult or not use the word brainwashing. They try to keep people like me out of the courts. They'll write something to the judge saying, she shouldn't be allowed to testify. But
the nerve.
So I have no problem with the word cults. It is what it is. We call a gang. Let's call a cult, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you can call it a self-sealing organization. You can call it a high control group. I think the problem with high control group is there are many high control groups that aren't necessarily cults.
Cults, right? Yeah, that's because I've been trying to kind of move towards that term. I'm trying to change my language so I don't put people on the offense right away when they hear me speak. But I'm not a professional. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just trying to share my story. But I often wonder things like when you say brainwashing and cult, like, do people just go, oh God, like I can't hear this. It's not about me. It can't be possibly.
I rarely use the term brainwashing, although I absolutely believe it exists. I used to be a brainwasher in the cult I was in. But the term is so controversial. And again, the cult apologists have made it even more controversial for people to use it. So I usually just use indoctrination. It's a very coerced indoctrination. It's as a sociologist, I sometimes describe it as a re-socialization, like you're getting socialized into a new existence and your self is kind of taken apart and they build a new you. And then people say, well, what about the Marines? Okay, the Marines use a lot of the same tactics, but the Marines, you get a pension. They don't tell you who to marry. You can leave when your term is up or whatever they call it. You don't
go to hell if you leave.
Yes, there are times when you can't question a command because it's life or death, but there actually is a chain of command and you can make complaints up the ranks if you need to. They may not always be the most responsive, but it's not like a cult, which there is absolutely no democracy in a cult. There's no accountability for the leadership.
Do you think that people have, like, just the general population, do you think that they have misconceptions about cult? Because I know, coming from one, I absolutely had misconceptions about what I thought a cult was and the reality versus what you're.
I was actually going to read. There's a question in the chat. Did you see that one?
No, but read it.
Yeah, maybe
Probably,
if Wes can put it up on the screen while I read it. But it says from Phil, what are some common misconceptions about cults and the process of leaving them?
Oh, I see.
And
it.
how can one help to dispel these misconceptions in order to better support those who have left or are considering leaving?
Okay. Perfect timing, Phil. That was a good one. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
So,
a job?
Yeah, the common misconceptions about who joins is that only stupid, weird, crazy, lazy people join cults, which is completely the opposite. Cults don't want stupid, weird, crazy, lazy people. They want you to work for them. They want you to recruit. They want you to bring in money. They want you to bring in legitimate contacts to enhance their reputation, et cetera, et cetera. Most cult leaders are actually pretty lazy. And so the idea is you're going to do everything that the cult leader wants to support him or her and meet his desires. And you're going to run the businesses, you're going to run the recruitment, whatever it is. So it's first that I think that's the biggest misconception about who gets involved in cults. I mean, cults want smart and, if possible, rich people to get right. And and I think another misconception is that only seekers join cults, but when in fact we're all seekers. It's a human characteristic that we look for a sense of meaning in our lives, a sense of purpose, a community that we feel we can trust, that we belong to, whether you call it a family or a community, it doesn't matter. But everybody who's a human being, unless they're a complete isolated person who lives in the woods, like that Unabomber guy who put the bombs in the mail.
Oh, yeah.
Very few people actually are that type of personality. And so it's not just, quote, seekers who join, but it's anybody who runs across the right person at the wrong time, or the wrong person at the wrong time. And then in terms of leaving, I think sometimes cult members get misdiagnosed by the medical system if they get any help at all. Sometimes they're given medicine like antipsychotic medicine because a doctor or a clinic who isn't familiar with cults might think somebody's psychotic because their belief system seems so cuckoo, but they're not psychotic. That's just what they believe, and that's what they've been indoctrinated to believe.
Right.
They don't need antipsychotic medication. They need what we call psychoeducation so that they can understand what happened to them and how it happened to them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's really deep.
Yeah. And so the process of leaving is difficult. And I think for people who have someone in a cult who they care about, the best thing to do is in any way you can maintain contact with that person. Like never cut them off. They may cut you off, but don't ever cut them off. Always be there. Don't be confrontational. Tell them you love them and support them. If they ever change their mind, your place is there for them. You want to be the safe haven that person feels they can come to if they change their mind, right? Yeah. You don't want that, they don't want to go somewhere where they think someone's going to say, see, I told you so. You shouldn't have done, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Nobody likes to hear that in any situation.
So they need to decompress. They may need to just sleep for a week, and that's fine. I mean, I slept so much after I got out of my cult because we worked 20-hour days, day after day, year after year. So you want to, if you have someone in a cult, what you want to do is try to tug at their heartstrings, right? You want to reawaken their emotional sensibilities from times before the cult, right? So send them their favorite cookies, send them photographs of times you went fishing together or whatever. If you get to see them, do fun things. Don't just sit down and have, philosophical or religious arguments, but do fun stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Go back riding, I don't care what, but just make it light, make it fun, make them see that you love them and that you're there for them.
Right. And not like judging.
Not judging. No.
Yeah.
No.
Nobody wants to feel like they're being judged by their mistakes because we all obviously.
We all make mistakes. We're human beings. And the mistakes that cult members make is because they were coerced into them. They weren't even they would have chosen on their own. So there has to be
so many decisions would have been different had we been educated differently, but we only could pull from the resources that we had. We thought we had a very very educational religion, and when I left, I couldn't believe how malinformed, misinformed, whatever you want to call it, I was. So, if you would have asked me before, I'd be like, yeah, I know all about this and all about that. And leaving
No,
realizing.
that's a problem with many cults, because especially when I did those interviews of the kids who grew up in cults, it's one of the biggest factors is that so many cults do homeschooling, and the homeschooling industry or whatever it is really not very regulated. So most of the time, all those kids get are maybe the sermons of the leader or the writings of the leader or listening to audio tapes of the leader. They're not getting educated. They're not getting math, science, history, etc. And that's why when people come out, they're at such a loss. So yeah, it's important to just be there for people.
Yeah.
Be there for people and be compassionate.
Definitely.
Right.
They've been through enough. Don't make it worse.
And there's probably way better ways that we as a society can be educating and handling these situations, but we've got our hands full with just trying to keep the church out of our government right now, let alone trying to educate people about cults and dangerous high control groups.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I just have a question before we begin to wrap up. What are some of the long-term effects that you see of people who have been in cults?
Well, it depends what you mean by long-term, but some part, depending on the length of time that the person was in and perhaps even what level they were at, some of it's never going to go away, right? It's like a bad marriage or anything, or, a long-term job that you had that was traumatic. I mean, some of it will always be with you, but it doesn't mean that it has to dominate your life.
Yeah.
So I think some people have panic attacks and anxiety attacks. In most cases, that doesn't last very long. And especially if you get educated and learn how to manage the triggers, what we call triggers, which are things that remind you and kind of take you back. It's like an acid flashback, right?
Right.
So, you'll hear certain music or a tone of voice. I used to think I would see my cult leader whenever I went to an airport. I'd see these, bodies that were shaped like hers, and I'd think it was her.
Oh, wow.
And that was after she died, So it's like there are certain things that stay, and you just have to learn how to poo-poo them and not, and I'd say some people have nightmares for a while, especially in the beginning. And I'd say the biggest thing is self-doubt, not trusting yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Former cult members apologize all the time. I still do it too. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
I'll do it. Good. I'm glad I'm not alone.
I thought that was just a Canadian thing.
Sorry, eh? That was terrible. My bad.
It takes time to learn how to trust yourself again and trust your instincts, which you weren't allowed to do when you were in the cult. So, and you were so, the whole purpose is to attack the self. So you have to rebuild yourself and what you believe in, and that takes time. And it's a roller coaster.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I'd say for people, there's times when you want to work on it or think about it or deal with it. And then there's going to be times when, like, I don't want to even look at that shit right now, right? I just want to watch a football game on TV, right? It's just and that's fine. Like, do what feels right for you.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Because everybody's journey is going to be different.
Exactly.
The healing journey isn't linear, which is something that I'm learning. I have days where I'm, flying high and everything's great. And then I have days where something just takes me back to feeling just completely out of control and not being able to make decisions in my life. And so it's even though there are absolutely the feelings of like, oh wow, I'm so glad I'm free. Like that feeling is always there. But sometimes that reality of what we woke up into,
right?
It's very harsh. And realizing like I could have learned this stuff like 10 years ago and I could have been pulling others with me. I just feel kind of behind. But we have to just remember that we're doing our best and we can only do what we can.
And it's really important not to compare yourself to someone else. You know, I see this all the time. Well, so much further ahead of me in her recovery, and I've even been out longer. Don't ever do that. It's like you said, each journey is individual, and your journey is going to be your journey. So don't compare yourself to anyone else.
Right. I think it's really important to make sure that when you, at least for me, I don't know if Stacy, if you have any wise words, but when it comes to healing, what has been really helpful to me is finding people like Stacy, like here on Skeptic Haven, people who've been through it, who understand, right, who've had similar parallel kind of lives, but still equally different. But again, because a lot of these high control groups, religions, whatever, are very similar. Once you start peeling away those layers, it's kind of like the same practices, just wrapped up in a different freaking package. It's just a different damn package is all it is. A shit-filled package. A package of poop. So we are at the 10, well, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that if there is anybody in the chat, if you have any questions, please make sure you get them in before we skedaddle off of here and be respectful of Dr. Lalich's time. Stacy, did you have any more? I want to make sure that if you had any more questions or anything to add that you need.
Everything has been wonderful. I just wanted to make sure that we touch on your workshops that you were mentioning and the courses that you have, because I think that's important.
You want me to do that now?
Absolutely. Yeah, please. We love that.
So as Ryan mentioned in the beginning, I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And I decided last year, now that I'm in my late 70s, believe it or not, that I want to make sure I leave a legacy because of the amount of work I've done. And so I have started a nonprofit, and we have received tax deductible status, and it's called the Lalich Center on Cults and Coercion. We have a temporary website, which is www.lalichcenter.org. And what we offer at the moment is discussion groups for survivors, as well as discussion groups for people born or raised in a cult. And these are weekly meetings. We limit them to 12 people. They cost $25. If anyone's interested in that, they can go to our website and fill out there's a form there to fill out, and you can say what you're interested in. And then our admin person will contact you. Her name is Tammy. She's kind of the heartbeat of the organization.
Awesome.
And then we just finished one writing workshop. We're doing another writing workshop that started last week. We hope to be soon doing a course on how to be an ethical coach, because coaching is such a big thing right now. People being used and abused. Coaches who charge a lot of money.
Those life coaches and such.
Right. In June, we're going to be doing a course by a professor of religion who grew up in a cult. And he's going to do a course. He's fantastic. He's taken all our courses in our groups. And he's going to do a course on how cults exploit religious traditions. And that course will really just be for anybody. You don't have to be a survivor, obviously. And all of these things are on Zoom, naturally.
Awesome.
And then eventually
that's so convenient.
Yeah. And eventually we'll do the courses that we were doing last year. Right now, we're holding off a little because my key partner, who's a trauma therapist, is going through cancer treatment. And so we want to wait until she's recovered a bit from that, because she does a fantastic presentation on how your brain responds to trauma, to make you not be so freaked out about the responses you're having. So that's what we do. I'm really proud of it. We've reached people from countries all over the world. It's been fantastic. So anybody who wants to sign up, you're welcome to sign up.
That's amazing. I love to hear it because it's just a huge part of the process that I would have never. I don't know. I never would have realized had I not kind of just stepped outside of my world and realized like, oh, okay, I'm allowed to ask questions now and I can do, I'm allowed to do research and I'm not going to face any punishment for
Right.
it. And I imagine that there are probably many people coming out of these groups who feel the same way, that are maybe just not sure where to go, what to do. And I don't think there are as many resources as there should be. I think a lot of money is invested into the churches, and in my opinion, I just do not think that is the way to go. I think money would be better spent into programs that, like you offer, that really can help heal people, that actually have informational stuff that you can trust. Because, like we've said before, trust is a big thing, and finding people that you can trust coming out of this whole shenanigan situation is very helpful.
We just have
one Stacy.
Last question here for Pena. How does fear of God and death play into cult manipulation? I notice those who are superstitious are often fearful as a vicious cycle. So
yeah, well, fear is a big motivator, and it's what cults use a lot. And I think the reason there was such success with QAnon and the anti-vaxxer movement, besides the fact that people were isolated during those early COVID years, but whenever a society is in crisis, whenever their world is being shaken up a little bit, and they're looking for answers, and they're afraid, like, what does this mean? Then that's a time for cults to recruit.
Yeah. That makes sense, because I saw so many people fall.
That's a short answer to a deep question, but
yeah.
No, but it's very helpful. How do you feel about, just quickly, how do you feel about the accountability in this country? How do you think we're doing here in America when it comes to what these religions are allowed to get away with?
Yeah, we don't want to so much go into that right now, but I would just say our country is in a bit of a mess,
And I think that you, of all people, are somebody who 100% absolutely is able to speak on that. So I think that people should be able to trust that if you say that is the case, then it is so because of your experience. And I 100% agree that right now, if you have the time, if you have the ability, call your representatives, let them know how you feel. Do your best to figure out what the statute of limitations are for assault cases in your state. Find out if there's the clergy penitent loophole. There's so many things that we can do behind the scenes if you really do want to, help keep church separated from government. There are some small things that you can do, and people don't realize that contacting your legislator can work. It's difficult, but it can work. They're supposed to work for us. So make sure you use your voice, and maybe we can dig ourselves out of this at some point and educate ourselves. And people like you are truly paving the way. And honestly, when I fangirl, and really, and especially having a woman who's done all this, that's like coming from a cult, having a woman in power who knows what she's talking about. It's huge. We need role models like you, and I appreciate you being here. Is there any words that you want to leave us with before we do all of our backstage stuff?
Well, I would just say for anybody who's looking to join something or sign up, take your time, do your research, pretend you're buying a car. Nobody buys the first car they look at. So be a good consumer. And thank you. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you'll have me back sometime.
Oh, we would absolutely love to have you
back. Okay, let's set that up right now. Okay, let me just pencil that in.
Thank you.
Stacey, do you want to handle our patrons and thank them for supporting this lovely channel, so that way we can get this pertinent information out to you?
Yes, so we just want to thank our patrons, Tara S., Brian, Deneen Murphy, Dandy, Bible Says What, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Colson, and Phil Calderon. And we also just want to make mention that we have a brand new show starting tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern here on Skeptic Haven. It's a call-in show, and the topic is leaving religion. Secular Rarity and Sunny Shell will be the hosts. So yes, you can call in. They'll take your questions. They'll take your discussions. It'll be every Sunday night starting tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for that. And then don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we have shows throughout the week. I also host on Wednesday nights, Secular Soapbox. And then we have women's show, like right now, Global Atheists and Sunny Shell's show as well throughout the week. So thank you so much. And before we go, where can people find you if they want to connect with you online?
Yes, yes.
Dr.
Socials or anything like that.
Yes, you.
Do you have any socials that you...
Yeah, I don't know my handles offhand, but I think if people
they're in the show notes, but can people connect with you?
But I'm always available and I love talking to people. So
you are wonderful. So
thank you
so much for being our guest and for just being such a huge, amazing resource. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a great show.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, everyone.
Yeah. Have a
Take
good
care,
weekend.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right.
Never slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past and the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness, hilarious.